Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, I've got two recent films. They've only just come out. One of them is doing incredibly badly at the box office. The other isn't doing as well as it should at the box office. The movies are, as you might have guessed from the thumbnail, Joker, Folie, Deux, and The Apprentice. Now, The Apprentice is going to be the controversial one. It's going to be the one that's going to give me the negative comments on the channel, because there are a lot of people who are creepily fond of Donald Trump, and some of them for some reason watch the channel. So I'm going to do that one second. First off, we're going to do Todd Phillips' Joker, Folie, Deux, a 2024 movie that stars Joaquin, of course, and Lady Gaga. And it's a dishonest movie. It is, of course, a sequel to Joker, the 2019 movie that Todd Phillips did, which is kind of parallel to the DCEU. It uses Joker as a character, and this sequel here uses the Joker, uses Harley Quinn in a very odd way. It also uses Harvey Dent, the district attorney, who in the canon of Batman becomes Two-Face. And I didn't like it for a number of reasons, and I'm going to tell you what they are. First off, at the start, there's an animated sequence done like a Warner Brothers cartoon of the events in the first movie, where Joker's shadow is tricking him into doing things. So Arthur Fleck, the character also known as Joker, the character's shadow does all of these things to trip him up and to make him do bad things, with the implication being that he has a dual personality. Here's the problem I've got with that. First off, there's a certain logic and a certain set of rules for an animated Warner Brothers cartoon. First off, it's got to be funny. This one just simply isn't. Secondly, it has to have a purpose and an energy all its own. And this one doesn't. All it does is recap the stuff in the first movie in an ostensibly comedic way. But it doesn't have the wit and the solidity of a Warner Brothers cartoon. As a way of creating the starting energy for the movie, it lets us down. It really is kind of meh. I've seen a lot better cartoon things done. I'm thinking of things like The Mask, where it used the tropes of Warner Brothers cartoons as a part of what it did. And one of the ongoing things throughout this movie is it's not as bold as it needs to be to do what it wants to do. And that's very much a problem. We then go to Arthur being in jail in Arkham Hospital / Asylum, which is on and on. The locations they got for Arkham Asylum are really groovy in this movie. And there are just enough really nice things in it that it annoys me that it pisses away all of its possibilities. It made me anticipate what was going to happen next, and then when the next thing happened, it totally disappointed me. It's like an unreliable boyfriend. So Arthur's in custody. He's got a lawyer played by Catherine Keener who's trying to get him a plea in the upcoming trial for him to be considered criminally insane. And so he won't get the death penalty because apparently Gotham has a death penalty. He ends up doing music therapy, and in that music therapy class is another inmate of the asylum, Harley Quinn, played by Lady Gaga, and they kind of fall in love, mostly with glances. There's a few problems with that as well. So we go through the budding romance between Lee and Arthur, and then we also go through Arthur's trial, where he's tried for the crimes he committed in the first movie, shooting Robert De Niro in the head being one of them. I'm not going to go further into the plot if I can help it. But here's the first thing. The movie's a musical, and I've got no problem with that. I love the idea of having the sequel to The Joker being a musical. I love musical. I always have done. But there's a few problems to this. The first thing is that Todd Phillips, because he pretty much got creative control after Joker hitting so hard and making so much money for Warner Brothers, he decided that he was going to have the actors sing on set and use that recording as the audio track for the singing. There's a lot of technical reasons why that's probably not a good idea, but there's worse. He also decided that when the actors are singing in non-dream sequences, and there are some dream sequences in the musical numbers in this, he wanted them both to sing slightly off-key. You've got Lady Gaga playing a role in a movie, and for most of her singing in the movie, you've got her singing desafinado, off-key. Fucking stupid. And also, Joaquin can sing. He played Johnny Cash in Walk the Line. He can hold a tune. In this, because Todd Phillips being Todd Phillips, he decided to do that. The other things wrong with the musical things is most of the songs in the musical part of this being a musical are love songs. There's actually one or two that aren't, but most of them are love songs of various types. And here's one thing about musicals that's quite important. Look at any classic musical. Songs tell us about characters. The songs tell us about changes in the character's life and the things the character knows about life and who the character is. Songs in a musical are not just on one theme. They're on a whole bunch of themes. Take South Pacific. There's a song about breaking up relationships. Gotta wash that man right out of my hair. There's a song about being horny. There's Nothing Like a Dame. There's Bally High, where the natives and Bloody Mary sing about a sacred island. There's You've Got to Be Careful You Talk, which is about racism. There's a whole bunch of different songs about different aspects of what the characters are going through. And that's what makes a kind of culturally rich musical. But this one, most of them are about love, the love songs sung between the two characters. And that's kind of flattened what a musical is. There is one great number in this, sung by Joaquin Phoenix, which is Anthony Newley's The Joker. And it's perfect for the character and what the character is going through. And it's filmed beautifully. It's a brief song and a brief sequence. No notes on that. It's perfect. And that's probably the only full good scene in the movie. And that's bloody disappointing. So what are the things that are wrong with Joker Folie Deux? For a start, Brendan Gleeson's in it and he's brilliant. And he gets to sing for like about 8 bars. Brendan Gleeson's got a great singing voice. They could have done more with him, bringing that character into the musical part of this musical. That would have been fantastic. That would have really hit for me. They didn't do that. Big mistake. Brendan Gleeson, fantastic actor. Loved him as Knuckles McGinty in Paddington 2. The guy can do no wrong. But they pissed away the possibilities of this guy in the movie. The other thing is most of the movie is either in the prison or at Joker's trial. If I wanted that, I'd watch Prison Break and Perry Mason. It's not what you go to see a Joker movie for. A trial and a guy being abused in prison. That's not what it's about. They also changed the character of Harley Quinn in ways that don't really enhance anything and diminish the character and marginalise her as just a crazy fangirl, essentially. There's a lot of other annoying things there as well. The constant chain smoking by Arthur and Harley and everybody else in the movie. Everybody chain smokes for no purpose. Now, this movie is, of course, set in the late 70s. People smoked in the late 70s and they smoked a fair bit. They didn't chain smoke all the time. The people who chain smoked eventually would be walking around with oxygen tanks. You know, the bad taste in people's mouths just meant that not a lot of people chain smoked all the time. There is also a bit where there's something that disrupts a court case, and that leads to the possibility of the movie opening itself up to more scenes in more different areas, but it doesn't. It just takes that away. And it comes out with an ending which is kind of disappointing. Well, actually more than kind of disappointing, which is very disappointing. And even though there is some stuff that happens in the background of those scenes, which is kind of interesting, it diminishes that character of Arthur Fleck, who we liked in the first movie and who was complex and fascinating, but we don't learn anything more about Arthur, and Arthur doesn't become more in this movie. There's a reason why the movie's doing so badly. This movie is a self-indulgent piece of crap because it doesn't deal honestly with either the characters or with the audience. If you're going to have a musical, there are certain disciplines and certain ways of doing it. And even when you break out of those ways, there are still certain disciplines and certain notes you've got to hit with an audience for the musical to be a good one. And this movie simply doesn't do that. There's also some problems with a lot of the cinematography. There's a lot of scenes both in the prison and at the trial where the predominant light is coming through the window from outside. And it just gives you a kind of tilted light look, which is a very same kind of thing, having it in both locations all the time. There should be a way of visually differentiating between the trial and the prison, and the movie just doesn't do that. I was bored in some of it. And I think, oh yeah, there it goes. Arthur's lighting another cigarette. Oh look, Harley's lighting another cigarette. Oh look, Brendan Gleeson's lighting another cigarette. And there are also some little bits and pieces they put in there as kind of movie buff tokens. There's a scene near the start where Arthur is being brought across the yard in the prison. And there are 4 prison guards around him, all with umbrellas. And then they show top down the umbrellas, and they're all in pastel colours, which is a visual reference to the umbrellas of Cherbourg, Jacques Demy's wonderful musical. but they're only there just as a little tick box for movie buffs. There's no purpose to why these umbrellas are pastel coloured, apart from going, hey look, I saw the umbrellas of Cherbourg. Really annoying movie, and it really cheesed me off a lot. And I wasn't a happy little camper when I finished watching it. And probably the most annoying thing is, there was potential in the way they were going to do it. There was potential in that very strong scene with Joker singing the Joker. And that worked. And it built goodwill, which it then pissed away by just not doing anything with it. And not truly and completely and delightfully committing to the movie being a musical. That's probably the biggest sin. You promised me a musical, you didn't deliver. You delivered just a whole bunch of jukebox songs sung by the protagonists half the time out of key. Annoying as hell, didn't like it for that reason. There's a reason why Terrifier 3 is doing much better at the box office than Joker Folie. It's a better movie and people like what it's doing, and it's transgressive, and it makes a promise to the audience. You are going to see Art the Clown doing horrible, transgressive things, monstrous things, and we're going to deliver that, and the director does that. So the reason why Joker isn't doing as well is the director makes an implicit promise to the audience and fully does not deliver that promise. That was the second movie I saw. But the first movie I saw is the one that's going to get the comments here. The Apprentice, Ali Abbas's biopic of Donald Trump in his formative years from the 1970s well into the 1980s. And as much as possible, Abbas based it on a number of different sources. News sources of the time, the biography and some testimony given by Ivana Trump, Trump's first wife, Trump's own book, The Art of the Deal, and a lot of court transcripts and other things about not only Donald Trump, but his mentor, Roy Cohn, who was part of the House Un-American Activities Committee and the Senate investigations into homosexuality in the 1950s. He got the Rosenbergs killed by the government for being Russian spies, then became a prosecutor and a lawyer in New York. And in the early 1970s, Donald Trump, played by Sebastian Stan, meets Roy Cohn, played by Jeremy Strong, in an exclusive club in New York. And there's something about Trump that Cohen sees. Roy Cohn was a closeted gay man, even though he knew Trump was hetero. He saw something in him that he was attracted to, and something in him that he could grow somebody from. Now, Roy Cohn was a monster of a human being. The kind of like the larval form of what Donald Trump became, but much, much earlier and much, much nastier. And so he sees this naive, foolish, but incredibly ambitious guy, Donald Trump, who at the time was working for his father. He's collecting rents in the tenements that Fred Trump owns, going door to door, knocking on the door, collecting the rent. He's ambitious, but he's still working for daddy. Fred Trump, played by Martin Donovan, really well done there. And Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn is incredible. If he doesn't get a nomination for a lot of things next time around, I think that'll be a crime against art. And Sebastian Stan as Trump has an incredibly difficult job, because he has to avoid all the cliches we now know, all the Saturday Night Live parodies, all the talk show parodies, and give us a Trump that's recognisable but doesn't go down that path. And he succeeds. The Trump we see at the start is kind of shy and uncertain of himself. He's ambitious and he sees things he wants, but he doesn't quite know how to get there until he hooks up with Roy Cohn, who nurtures him. Trump's got this idea to convert the derelict Commodore Hotel in the Times Square area into a prestige hotel, but he's got a lot of things blocking his way. First off, his father doesn't want him to do it. Secondly, there's a lot of tax burden there, which he needs to get rid of in order to make the project viable. And Roy Cohn's the man to see about that. Roy Cohn's the one who goes into the meetings they have with the New York government, which was bankrupt at the time. And that part of New York was incredibly sleazy, incredibly run down, derelict, full of junkies and sex workers and pimps and all sorts of things. But the one virtue Trump had at the time was he saw potential in the Times Square area. And so Cohen helps him. He teaches him who to be in order to get what he wants. He teaches him that you've got to be utterly ruthless to survive in the New York real estate market and to survive the combination of politics and money that is that market. He does things to help Trump, like Cohen has the dirt on everybody, so he uses blackmail as a part of the hearings that are going on to get Trump what he needs to get this hotel going. And he also helps him later on when Trump is trying to build Trump Tower. He warns him against going into casinos in Atlantic City, because Trump does a lot of stupid things with those casino deals, including putting two casinos he owns right next to, across the road from each other in Atlantic City, rather than spreading things out, so he's not competing with himself. And then we've also got the dynamic of Trump meeting Ivana and trying to get her to fall in love with him. He's interested in her, she's not interested in him. He persists to a criminally cringy extent, and she finally yields, and they get married and things like that. There's also a subplot with his brother Freddie Trump, who is an airline pilot, who has a problem with alcohol, because the abusive family dynamic is something that the older brother Freddie just wasn't able to handle, and he developed mental health issues because of that. And that's an interesting sideline as well. By the way, Ivana Trump is played by Maria Bakalova, who does a really good job of it. Her Ivana is Donald Trump's equal. She's twice as smart as he is. She knows she's on the gravy train, but she has her own businesses, and she had her own businesses before she met Trump, and she had her own career before she met Trump. But when they got married and started having children, the way Donald Trump treated her changed enormously. He was he couldn't handle his kids. He couldn't handle the changes that a woman has when she has children. He got her to have breast implants and then decided he didn't like them. He was having affairs outside the marriage, all of that kind of stuff, which is documented. Hits really hard in this movie. And there is one scene of sexual violence, which is first off documented as fact, but was later rescinded by Ivana Trump for monetary reasons, which is quite brutal and quite nasty. We also see Trump changing as the 1980s hits and the Reagan era started, where he starts to take on board the philosophy that Roy Cohn gives him. Roy Cohn gave him 3 rules to live by. The first one is attack, attack, attack. The second one is admit nothing and deny everything. And the third one is, no matter what happens, you claim victory. That was the approach that Roy Cohn gave him for business. We now know that in the 21st century, Trump took that psychopathic set of rules and adopted them as a political platform and a way of getting to the highest job in the land. But Sebastian Stan is really good because his Trump evolves. And as we get towards the later scenes, which are in the 1980s, we see that getting embedded solidly into his personality, the attack, the admit nothing, deny everything, and the claim victory even when you fail kind of thing. The beautiful thing about the acting there is the cadences and the word choices and the approach Trump takes to his interactions with anybody heads towards the Trump we know today. It's a beautifully measured piece of acting, right from the start where he's going door to door collecting the rent, to when he is the toast of New York and he's getting his ghostwriter to write the art of the deal. That arc is done incredibly well. Then there's the other side of things too, where in the 1980s, Roy Cohn develops AIDS and his lover develops AIDS. And Cohen's career is starting to diminish. He goes to Trump and gets Trump to put up his lover in a hotel that Trump owns because he's got pneumonia, he doesn't have anywhere to live. And Trump does that for a time, but then chucks him out because the guy's got AIDS and sends Cohen the bill for it, even though Trump owed Cohen a lot. And Cohen, all through his life, and even to his death, denied that he had AIDS. He said he had liver cancer. It's part of that philosophy of admit nothing, deny everything. And there are a few scenes between Trump and Cohen which hit really hard as Cohen, diminished and dying essentially, goes to Trump for help and is treated incredibly shabbily by him as he does that. And a lot of that stuff, and that's also where Trump developed his germ phobia, because he asked his doctor about AIDS and whether you could get AIDS from somebody touching you or shaking hands and things like that. It's where that neurosis developed in Trump. And it reminded me of my experience in the 1980s, where I had friends who developed AIDS and who unfortunately died. And I remember at the World Science Fiction Convention here in Melbourne in 1985, there was this weird dynamic between American gay science fiction fans and some Australian gay science fiction fans, where the Australian ones wouldn't even shake hands with the American gay fans. And me and my friend group had done a lot of research about this and knew that it was a blood disease and you needed to exchange semen or blood to get AIDS. There was a fan I'd been corresponding with who was gay, and he turned up at the Worldcon, travelled all the way across the planet, and saw each other, and he said, "Can I have a hug?" And I went, "Yeah." And I gave him a hug, and then he said to me, "Do you know there's no gay fan here in Australia who was willing to give me a hug because I was gay and American, and they thought I might have AIDS?" And that friend, who I won't name, I'll protect his privacy, gave me a badge. And that badge, which says "Hug, heterosexuals unafraid of gays." And the scenes with Cohen getting AIDS and the reaction that people had to people with AIDS in the 1980s reminded me of that experience I had. It's, for me, one of the most powerful scenes in the movie. Even though Roy Cohen was a monstrous human being and a total piece of shit, that inhumanity to people who had acquired a disease, which was acquired in at least an act of passion, if not love, really hit hard for me. And it reminded me of those years and the friends I've lost. So The Apprentice, whatever your political beliefs are, it's a good, solid movie. It's a biopic about a man becoming his worst self and the things that made him his worst self and the emptiness in that man. There's a scene where the ghostwriter is interviewing Trump about writing The Art of the Deal. And he says to Trump, which is a perfectly valid question to ask, you're all about getting the deal. What comes after the deal? What is the purpose of the deal? And he doesn't have an answer for that because for him, there's nothing beyond the deal. There's no greater reason than winning. And there's no greater reason than getting your own way. There were some Trump allies who tried to get the movie banned from distribution in America. And eventually it did find a distributor, but it's probably not going to get enough distribution to make a profit. In this time of political disputation, there is a cult around Donald Trump, which many people find incredibly disturbing and incredibly familiar. And that cult is not going to like this movie. That cult will speak against anybody who speaks for this movie. I think for a small film, it does incredibly well in this. It does things honestly, and it does things well. And the acting and the direction and the set designs and the blocking and the mise en scène. There's a great scene where Trump meets Andy Warhol and doesn't recognize him. Stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of different things that I liked about this film. Didn't like the fact that they got some guy to play Rupert Murdoch who didn't have an Australian accent, which is dishonest. Rupert Murdoch's a piece of shit, but he does have an Australian accent. Little bits and pieces like that annoy me, but for the most part, I think this is a put a pin in the map kind of movie, where it's delineating a certain moment in time and talking about somebody who obsesses the news cycle and talking about somebody who has changed human history in a negative way, and it's changed for a lot of people their relationship with truth and objective reality. And that's both astonishing and dangerous. A lot of people are going to wait to see this movie on streaming, and I don't blame them if they do. But it's an honest film. I think it does what it does well on a small budget. It does what it does bravely. And it's a movie you should check out and then decide for yourself what you think of it. And so there's the two movies for you. Neither of them is science fiction. Neither of them is fantasy or horror. But both of them speak to the times in which we live. Joker, Folie, Deux could have been so much better with only marginal extra effort. And The Apprentice should have been distributed to a wider audience because it is about the subject du jour in this particular moment in history. That's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what you think of these movies, whether you're going to see them or not. So if you like the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave that comment in there. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next video, I've got the new releases from Umbrella Entertainment. And there's some really good movies in those. And there are also some hidden gem movies, which I've read up a little bit about, but I haven't watched yet. but geez, they are fantastic, deep-cut hidden gems from the last 30 years of cinema. And I'm looking forward to seeing them. And then, of course, we get into Science Fiction Saturday again. I'm going to find you another double feature. So until all of that stuff happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some movies that are going to cheese off your conservative friends. And I'll catch you next time.